Hi, quilters and crafters. Check out this brand new book featuring 12 adorable quilt block patterns. Some are fresh new designs created just for this book, while others are a few of our very best sellers. Inside, you'll find step-by-step instructions and full-size patterns for each block, perfect for quilters of all levels. It's a fantastic value. Individually, these patterns would cost about $8 each, but in this book, you're getting them for about $2 per pattern. You'll find the link in the description to purchase the book on Amazon or download the digital version. Once you have your copy, you can follow along with this video tutorial for extra guidance. Timestamps are included below so you can jot directly the pattern that you want to work on. Let's get started. For basic paper piecing, you're going to copy your pattern for as many blocks as you want to make because the paper pattern will be destroyed in the process. Each area is numbered, and this is in the order that I'm going to add the fabric. There's a little box next to each pattern that will tell you if this is a background fabric or a body fabric or whatever it is, so you want to follow that. You can see it has extra parts here, but that's just showing you where the arms are going to be placed into the seam. Right now, we're just working with the lines of the different areas. So we're going to start with number 1, and it said it's the body fabric. So area number 1 is placed right side away because it's not going to be stitched and flipped to cover. It's placed that way because it's right where it's going to stay. And I'm going to pin it to secure it. Now I need to add area number 2, and I've whacked a piece of background fabric, and I need to place it on that line on this side, but it's can be blind, right? I can't see the lines on that side. So I can fold that line, and that will transfer it to this side. Then I'm going to place the fabric right side down 1/4 of an inch past that line, that fold line, where the bulk of the fabric's opposite this area I'm going to cover. Then I'm going to turn it over and sew that whole line between 1 and 2. Now I've trimmed the extra out of that seam allowance, and it will fold back and cover area 3. Each time I add a fabric, I press it so that the seams are really sharp. Now I want to paper piece area 4, and I can crease it again to help me locate that if I want. And I've cut a piece that's bigger than area 4, and I'm going to place it past that fold line so the bulk is opposite where I'm trying to cover. Turn it over and sew that whole line. Now I've added that last piece, trim the extra out of the seam, and while the paper is still on the back, I've cut it out on the outside dash line. I did set the stitch length just a little bit closer together so that it will perforate the paper and it's even easier to rip it out. At this point, you can rip it out. There's nothing left to mark on that pattern like an antenna or something. You just rip it out. It's not needed. This is where we destroy the paper patterns. And look how great that looks. The perfect little points, just neat and clean. Super easy, a little strange, but it works great. Each of these blocks begins by making the dimensional pieces. You're going to Xerox that page in the book that has the pieces. There's a bear, butterfly, there's a little duck. Of course, there's a dragonfly too. Then you're going to place the piece on top of 2 pieces of fabric that are right sides together. Then polyester bonded batting. You're going to sew on that outside solid line. I like to stitch length a little bit closer together so it perforates the paper. Then you back stitch where the lines begin and end, and that will secure them so when I'm pulling the paper out, I won't pull the stitches out. Then I cut on the outside dash line and remove the paper, and you can do a little clip into any V's. Be careful to not clip the stitch line, but that kind of helps it turn. Then you turn it right side out through the opening and press. The hotter the iron, the flatter it will be. You may want to keep it fluffier. Now, some of the pieces, like the bear paw, is sewn all the way around. So what you're going to do once the paper's removed, you cut on the dash line, then you remove the paper. You're just going to slip 1 layer of fabric and turn it right side throughout that hole and press it. Then when the little paw is sewn to the bear like that. You're going to place it on there and save that pattern for the paw. You put the paper pattern on there, sew around right there like a top stitch, and that's going to enclose the slit. Oh, here's the little slit piece. See, and that will be enclosed in those stitches. Now the butterfly is sewn as the wings are one piece, and you're going to turn them through the V. So finish all of those pieces, and then we'll show you how to put it into the block. I'll just show you the basics of paper piecing without little twist of adding dimension. So I've Xeroxed my pattern. I'm going to use this little dialog box for telling me which color each of these sections will be. This little deck, they're all background. So I've cut a piece of background fabric larger than area 1, and all my fabric is placed on the unprinted side of the paper pattern. Number 1 is the only one that is right side away from that paper, and all of area 1 is covered. Now I'm going to machine baste, where I'm going to add the dimensional pieces. This is what's different about this kind of paper piecing. That will transfer it to this side. Then I'm going to place all my dimensional pieces. So this deck has the body 1/4 inch past that basting, the wing centered on the body, also aligns with the open edge, and the neck, which will align with the open edge. Then I'm going to cut a piece of background for area number 2. Place it right side down, so the bulk of the fabric's opposite where I'm going to be covering area 2. Pin it to secure it, then you turn it over and sew that full line. Once that whole line is stitched, this will fold back and cover area 2. And you can understand why it was right side down, why this one was right side away, right? Because it's placed right where it's going to stay. Everything else is right side down because it's going to flip and cover the next area. You see how all the seams are enclosed in that seam. Now I'd like to show you how I'm going to tack down this body and the head on this little deck. I'm going to keep the wing dimensional, right? So I don't want to tack that down. It's not like an applique stitch where you have to put all the little tiny stitches on the very edge, because that's what's going to keep it from unraveling. This won't unravel, right? Because the seam is pretty solid. But I don't want the stitches right on that edge, because when it pulls, you'll see them, because this is a little bit thicker. So I'm just going to roll this over just a little bit, and right inside on the underneath side, I'm going to do, kind of a running stitch really. Once in a while, I'm going to do a backup stitch just to really secure it, or I could do a tiny knot. That works too, just so if it goes through the laundry, it's not going to pull out. Now this is not going to take you a lot of time like an applique stitch. It really isn't. Goes fast, but see how, because it's underneath, and then I still get this little dimensional part that lifts off the quilt that's not attached. And that's what I want. So then I'm also going to do that to the head. Now I don't have to tack down that beak. It's kind of cute out a little bit like that. So we're going to finish that, and then we'll show you how to do the eyes, the satin stitch eyes. Now I'll show you how to satin stitch the little eyes. You can use a button for sure. If this is just going to go on a wall hanging or something you don't mind, children aren't going to play with it. Just use a button. Now I've added some eyelashes. You can customize this little guy any way you want to do it. This is again 6 strands of embroidery floss. And the satin stitch is pretty easy. First draw in your design. Then you're just going to lay the stitches side by side, just so that they lay right next to each other. Watch, it's just going to come, like, lay right down. Now you can see where I could have made this stitch a little bit wider here, so it'd be more rounded. I can go back and add a stitch in there if I want, make it nice and round. And I pre-did the eyelashes, so when I put the satin stitch over them, you won't see the end where they started. They'll be part of the eye. So easy. We're just going to go up and then start decreasing the stitches to make it look round. Now we'll show you the outline stitch. I used all 6 strands of an embroidery floss. Really helps it to pop. Tied a knot in the end of it. And I've started here. I copied the pattern. I did that before I removed the paper pattern. Just hold it up to the light. And then it's just not a fancy stitch at all. It's just butting the stitches up end to end. So here I'm going to come up. And then I'm just going to go back down in that same hole as the last stitch. Super easy, just nothing fancy about this at all. And then I'm just going to finish around. The length of the stitches really depends on you. If they're too short, then it looks kind of choppy, but if they're too long, then you're not going to get a nice curve. Here we have finished. I just want to show you one more thing. So I want a knot just right next to the fabric. I don't want it hanging out where it can be seen through on the white background. So just loop it around like this. Got your thread loop. Do like 2 or 3. If I do 3 with 6 strands, it's kind of bulky. And then keep your loop open and just push the little places where you've looped it right to the edge of the fabric. Put your fingernail on it and then pull it like that. And then the little knot is right at the end. That should help you. And I did tack the head down on the edges, and it turns out great. This is a really easy trick for turning awkward pieces right side out. This is the cat tail, and it's hard to turn it around the corner, or perhaps the dragonfly head that has a narrow neck. If you have a restaurant straw that's heftier and a larger hole, then you need a dowel or something you can poke through the center of that straw. This is just something I found out in the garage, but a dowel would work too. Then what you want to do is put the straw up and around to the very back end of what you're trying to turn, and you can see the straw through the fabric, the hole. Then put your implement, your dowel or whatever it is, in the end of that hole, that straw, and start rolling the fabric over the dowel or the thing you put inside the straw. Just go around like that. By then, the straw is just holding it, helping you reverse it. And then you can easily turn it like that. Super easy for turning those pieces. And then of course you'd have to work with it, rolling it with your hands back and forth to get it to be well defined. So here's the same thing with the dragonfly head. I put the straw up and then I find the end of the straw, put my dowel or whatever I have that goes inside the straw through, and then just poke it up. Roll the fabric over your dowel. While your dowel's up there, kind of poke it out and around, and then I'll take it to the iron and kind of go back and forth like this until it's completely to the seam line. There you go. Super easy to do with a straw and a dowel or something that goes inside. To make the bow for the bear or the bunny, you can use a regular ribbon, which is adorable, or you can use what's in the pattern, which is just fabric, which is awesome because you can use different prints to bring out another element in that design. So the dimensions are in the pattern, but you're just going to sew up the outside, just leaving an opening for turning. Grade out the corners, turn it. I could hand close it, but it's not necessary. With double thread, a knot at the end, I'm just going to go down the middle and do just a few very long running stitches like that, just right down the middle. I would use matching thread, and then I wrap it just to keep it secure and pull it. That's all there is to it. And then hand sew it up under the chin. You have to lift the chin, sew it in there. Of course, it would look better with matching thread. Super easy to make that bow. Hope that helped. Now I'll show you how to dry brush the blush on this little duck. This is a little makeup I put here, and that works pretty good too. It's a little softer, and now I'm going to add a little paint over that because I want it a little more permanent. This is a fabric paint. You could use any acrylic paint. It's pretty permanent on fabric once it dries. I use a paper towel. I've put a little bit of paint there, and I'm using a stipple brush. This is just a stiff brush, not soft at all. And I'm going to put a little paint on there, and then I'm going to bounce it until it's almost dry. That's important. Otherwise, it's just going to look gloppy, okay? And then I just go up and down and bounce it till I get the depth of color that I want. Now this is going to be a little more permanent than the makeup I had down there. And the idea to get your depth is to do more layers, not necessarily a lot of paint. It's always just very, very dry. There you go. There's my little blush. In this video, I'm going to show you how to paper piece when the angle is a little weird. Okay, the sharpness of this angle, if I were to lay a rectangle piece down and sew it, and then it folds out, it's going to go this way and possibly cut off this quarter. And so one solution is to just cut really big pieces of fabric. Sometimes that's quite a waste. So I'm going to show you this technique. So want to paper piece this area number 2, and it's got an odd angle. So I'm going to place the fabric on it so that all of area 2 is covered and it's right side away. Now just bear with me because this will make sense. Then I'm going to fold that seam line, and it's going to crease it on this side. Then I'm going to reverse that fold like that, and if I'm really careful, I open it up and I've got the perfect placement for that fabric so that it will open and cover that piece. It's also a great way you could fussy cut with paper piecing, or you can even use plaids because you're going to lay that fabric on the grain, or the way you want the fabric to be finished. Then you're gonna fold out the seam. This is a great way to save fabric, so you don't have to cut quite as big of a piece, and to make sure you cover all of that area when the angle is weird. Just like the other patterns, you're going to make all the pieces, the dimensional pieces, and you copy your pattern, as many fish as you want to make, and you place the paper pattern on top of 2 pieces of fabric that are right side together, thin polyester bonded batting, sew on the outside solid line, cut on the outside dash line. Remove the paper. Then you're going to turn it right side out. Now on this particular pattern, the 2 tricky ones for turning are the tail and the little face. And we have this demonstrated in the how-to section, but I'm just going to do it again really quick in this section in case you don't go to the how-to section. But you get a straw, like a McDonald's straw. It's a thicker straw, it's a bigger straw, and a dowel that will fit in the end of that straw. And you put the straw inside to the very end that you're trying to turn, and you put the dowel in the end of that hole of the straw, and you begin to roll it over the dowel, and the straw comes out. It's just there to start the process, to start it turning, and then you get it through the hole. Now on the tricky part on this fish is we've got 2 fins that we need to put through that hole. So you just put the straw at the end again of the other fin, start it rolling over the dowel, and then it will just push through the hole. That's pretty easy. Then I'm going to work on getting it shaped really well and press it. Now, on the face, the fish will flip different ways depending on a left-facing fish or right-facing fish. But you're going to slit one layer since it's sewn all the way around. And we did grade or clip to the very tip without compromising the stitches of the mouth. That's important for turning. Then you're going to put the straw again, very tip that you're trying to turn. Put the dowel on the end of the straw. As it begins to turn, put it up through the hole. Now the trick on this little face is you've got the 2 sections. So I just do the straw thing on both upper and lower mouth. The straw on the end. The straw just holds it while it starts to turn over the dowel. That you get both the little tips coming through. Pull them. Takes a little patience for this guy. Pulling. Use the dowel to poke it through. Could even do it a 3rd time if it doesn't want to go. Do it again. Pull it through. Yes. Get him all. It's worth it. If this little mouth is how we make the fish pucker. Gives him a lot of personality. We can use the dowel for poking out the fish. Then you're going to press him all the little shapes are well defined. Then I'm going to add some stuffing into, it's not cheeks, it's gills, not really gills, right? The shape of his head. Add some stuffing, and then you underfold the lip like that and whip stitch it closed. And that's what puckers his little face. I'll use a button for the eyes, where I can do a little round felt and whip stitch on the edge. I'm going to hand gather the fins. I've cut 2 pieces of fabric, and in the one fabric, one side, I'm going to place the body right in the middle and the tail like this. And you want it to match where the seam allowance will hit. Okay, pin that to secure it, and then do a 1/4 inch seam across. Now with the tail on the left side, when it flips this way and the head is placed, then the little guy his tail is flipping down. Then we'll reverse it. The tail is on the right side. It's 1.5 inches. The little behind is 1.5 inches from the side, so he's not centered. When the tail flips back, now the fish is flipping the other way. His tail flips up. That's a little trick to remember on which side you place your tail. Now these little fish turn out so cute the way they flip, but maybe you want them facing the other way. So there's one little trick to doing that. Remember how we made the faces? We put the paper pattern on top of 2 pieces of fabric, right sides together, thin polyester bottom batting. Then we sew on the outside solid line, including coming into the mouth. Cut on the outside dash line, also coming into the mouth. Then we remove the paper and we turn it right side out by slitting 1 layer of fabric. Turn it through that, and then that slit goes next to the quilt block. Well, how you make the fish face the other way is you're going to put the batting in between the paper and the fabric. So when you sew and take your paper out, you're going to be able to slit on the opposite layer of fabric, and this will make the fish swim the other way. Super easy to do, and that might help you fit it in that corner of the quilt that you want it and where you want it facing. Begin the frog by making all of your dimensional pieces. This piece is left open here at the bottom for turning right side out. Then I turn under 1/4 inch, and I can machine base that closed. The mouth is sewn all the way around, so to turn it, I just slit 1 layer of fabric, turn it through that, and then whip stitch that closed. The other trick is these little eyes. They're really pretty easy. They're stacked just as the other pieces are done, but 1 layer is white. Then between the white and the froggy fabric, I put a piece of fabric that was folded wrong sides together, and the little fold is placed on the design line. Then I sew it, turn it right side out, and I've got a beautiful little lid. Then I'm going to paper piece the block by first placing my area 1, which is background fabric, and it's right side away, and it covers all of area 1. Then I'm going to machine baste where the little body head meet the seam, and that will transfer it to this side. Then I'll place the open ends 1/4 inch past that basting. Then I'm going to cut background fabric for area 2 and 3, place them right side down, also past that basting. The bulk of the fabric is opposite where I'm going to cover. Then I will turn it over and sew that whole line. Trim the extra out of the seam, and this will fold back and cover that little side area. Then I'll do the same to this side. With area 2 and 3 finished, the bulk of the fabric cut out of the seams and it's pressed open, I machine based along this side where the little feet go into the seam, and that will transfer the location to this side of the pattern. Then I've pinned these feet 1/4 inch below that basting so that all the raw edges will be enclosed in that seam. Then I place background fabric right side down so the bulk of the fabric's opposite where I'm going to cover, and it's also past that basting. Then I'll turn it on the other side and sew that whole line. Now the little feet are going to fold down, and then I'm going to put this piece right along that edge, and I'm going to sew following the seam line on the block down and across and up to secure that. And I'm going to back stitch on these openings. This will be a little pocket, little divided pocket. This will make the division. Now I've closed the opening on the back of the mouthpiece, and I whip stitched the open edge of the tongue to the back and tacked the tongue to the front. Then I'm going to place the little mouth over this block, and I'm going to just squish him in just a little bit to fit within these seam lines, and that will gape open his mouth. And then I'm going to blind stitch around the outside. Now the eyes, I can just pull back and zigzag them to the quilt block. And then for the pupils and the irises, I'm going to just cut felt. The pattern is given to you, and then just whip stitch around the outside of those felt pieces with matching thread. And then this little guy will be finished, and he just turns out adorable. He's really not very hard, pretty easy. Now we'll teach you how to make this adorable ladybug. You're going to copy your paper pattern, and it will come straight up like this, or it'll be on point. Choose which way you want your little ladybug to be oriented. First, you begin by making the wings by placing the paper pattern on top of 2 pieces of fabric that are right-sized together and stacked on top of thin polyester bonded batting. Then you're going to sew on the outside solid line, cut on the outside dash line, including in between. Remove the paper and turn them right side out. Now, I begin by foundation piecing area 1 and 2, 1 being the body fabric, 2 background. Then with this side up, I'm going to machine baste where the wings go into the seam, and that will transfer it to this side. Then I'm going to place a wing so that the raw edges are 1/4 of an inch past that basting. Then I'll put down a piece of background fabric large enough to cover this whole area here. The bulk of the fabric's on this side. Then I'll turn it over and sew that whole line. Once that's sewn, it will flip back and cover that area, plus the wing will flip back. We'll show you what that looks like. I trimmed the extra fabric out of the seam allowance and then flipped back the background and the wing, pressed it. Now I'm going to place the second wing 1/4 of an inch past that basting. I want to make sure the top part matches. Okay? And then I cut a piece of background fabric larger than this last piece I need to cover. This area I need to cover. So it's 1/4 of an inch past the basting. The bulk is opposite where I'm going to cover, pin it to secure, and then I'm going to sew that whole line between 1 and 2 and 4. Now the wing and the fabric fold back. I cut the extra out of the seam allowance and pressed it, and then I cut it out on the outside dash line. You want to trace the antennae by hold it up to the light, trace it, so that you'll be able to outline stitch that. Now there's several options for the head. You can cut the pattern out of this Pelletech that's available in the fabric store. It's just a very thick Pellon that will hold that shape. And then there's also the pattern for the fabric that you can just wrap around it. I like to just use double thread and go back and forth until all of that fabric is wrapped around it. I've put batting in here so it will look more like a pillow, but you don't have to do that. You can just have it be flat. You can also just make a dimensional piece like our other patterns where you put 2 pieces of fabric right side together, stack it on polyester bonded batting, and sew it, then just slip 1 layer of fabric for turning it right side out. Then I'm going to blind stitch that right up against the wings, and I just need to tack up here, the wings up here. I want to leave this free, and then you're going to outline those antennae, and this little ladybug just turns out adorable. In this video, I'll show you how to make this duck with little dimensional wing. You start by Xeroxing your main block piece, and you'll Xerox the page that has the dimensional pieces. Then you make each of these pieces by placing paper pattern on top of 2 pieces of fabric right side together and thin polyester bonded batting. Then you're going to sew on the outside solid line. I set the stitch length just a little bit closer together so that it'll perforate the paper and be easier to tear out. I like to backstitch where the solid line begins and ends. So when I'm tearing the paper out, the stitches will not be pulled. You cut on the outside dash line and see where there's not a solid line, that's going to be open for turning. You take the paper out, and that will include these little seams. Will have little thin paper that you'll pull out. Turn it right side out and press it so that all the edges are well defined. Now, if you use a hot iron, it will press the batting down flatter, which is just a different look, or you can use a cooler iron. Now, to piece this duck, I've Xeroxed my block. I've cut a piece of background fabric larger than area 1, and of course I've placed it on the unprinted side of the paper pattern right side away. Then I'm going to machine baste where the duck, the wing, and the head meet that seam, and it will be transferred that marking to this side. Then I'll place the body 1/4 inch above that line, then the wing, which will align with that edge, and then the head. And the head will align here at the neck. Pin that to secure. Then I'm going to place another piece of background fabric larger than area 2, which is the next piece I'm going to add. And it's going to be face down, also past that basting. Pin that to secure. Turn it over. Then I'm going to sew that whole line. That will enclose the raw edges of the wing and the body and the head. Then I'm going to open it up and press it flat. I'll trim the extra of the seam, and we'll show you that. Once that whole line is stitched, it will fold back and cover area 2. Now there'll be extra fabric in that seam. You could trim that out, press it so that it will lay flat. And on this side, I'm going to machine baste where the duckbill meets that seam to transfer it to this side. So I've got the basting for the duckbill. I'm going to place the open edge 1/4 inch past that basting, pin it to secure. Then I've got another piece of background fabric larger than area 3. I'm going to place it right side down along the edge of that duckbill so the bulk of the fabric is opposite where I'm covering. Then I'll turn it over and sew the whole line across that whole block. And then I'll trim the extra out of the seam. I'll show you what that looks like. Once that whole line is sewn, we're going to trim the extra out of the seam and fold it back. Make sure this fabric covers all of area 3. Then the little head of the duck will tack on, and we'll show you how to blind stitch these dimensional pieces so they stay dimensional, and we'll show you how to satin stitch the eye and blush the cheek. And then before you take the paper out, you're going to cut it out on the outside dash line to make it square. Butterfly has just a little extra technique. You're going to copy your pattern. You're going to keep these 2 pieces together, and you're going to first place background fabric to cover all of both areas of number 1 on the unprinted side, right side away. Then you're going to machine baste where the wings, these V's, meet the seam, and that will transfer to this side. Then I previously made my wings, and I've kept those together too. I haven't cut them apart, and I'm going to place the raw edges 1/4 inch past that basting, below the basting on the lower one, above the basting on the upper wing, like that. I'm going to pin that to secure it. And to really secure it, I'm going to machine baste in the seam allowance down and back up to really hold those wings together. Now with that basted so securely, I can cut right down the middle on that dash line, and those wings are secure. Now with the part, I'm going to foundation piece or paper piece these little sides here, the 2s and the 3s. So remember how we do that is we're going to place background fabric along that edge, bring it over, sew that whole line, trim the extra out of the seam, and then it will fold back and cover that little corner, okay? And I'm going to do that to all 4 corners. Now, after adding these 2 sections, 2 and 3, trimming the extra out of the seam and paper piecing those 2 corners. We cut it out on the outside dash line. And we're going to remove the paper, and then you put them together and sew them. And what you want to do is kind of hold them like this so that this middle wing or the large wing matches. And they should just match up perfect because it's paper paste done with exactness on the paper. And then at that point, you would hold up the pattern for the antenna. Hold it up to the light and then trace it. We don't trace it before we sew it together because the stitching can throw it off. So when it's all sewn together, then trace the antenna and go to the how-to section. It will show you how to embroider the antenna. And this butterfly just turns out gorgeous. We've made all the dimensional parts for the kitty, same as the other quilts. Putting the paper pattern on top of 2 pieces of fabric right size together and then polyester bonded batting. Sew in the solid line, cut on the outside dash line, remove the paper, turn them right side out. Now the head and the snout are sewn all the way around, so just 1 layer of fabric with slit for turning. I hand whip stitched that closed. Then I'm going to put the snout, before I close the snout, I put extra stuffing in the cheeks. I place it right on top of the head, and I'm going to sew down the middle to attach that little head to the snout. Then the little leg was also had a little extra stuffing added to both parts and the little foot. To make the ear, we cut 2 kinds of fabric, 4.5-inch square, cut them diagonal, sew them together. One will be the inside of the ear, so it'll be contrasting, and then fold it again like this. And then with a double threaded needle, we're going to hand gather just an arc. So you don't want to go straight across the opening. Just do a gentle arc. You see it here. Well, not very well with the stitches being white, but it starts a little higher, goes down, and then back up with really big stitches because we just want to gather some gentle hold for the ear. Then you're going to place it on the back of the head and whip stitch that in place. Do that with both ears. Remember, all the fabric is placed on the unprinted side of the paper pattern. Now, if you don't like working blind like that, it's really easy just to crease the seams that you're working on, and that will give you a nice line to work with. I creased the bottom here too, so that I could put the foot past this line and past the lower part, because I want this open part of the foot in that seam. Now I've cut a piece of background fabric that is larger than area 2. And I'm going to place it across that fold or that seam so the bulk of the fabric's opposite where I'm trying to cover. And then I'll turn it over and sew that whole line. I've paper pieced with background fabric 2, 3, and 4. I used to try to slide that tail into the seam, but it comes down past when you're putting the quilt block into a quilt, and it can get in the way. So let me show you a little trick there. We've pressed it, cut it out on the outside dashed line, and then we machine basted the little leg right here across the bottom part, not on the seam allowance line, but before the seam allowance, so that basting won't show when you put it in a quilt. Then we can put the little face on, and the how-to section shows you how to hand baste that, blind stitch that on. And then when it's in a quilt, you just lift the little leg and zigzag that edge of the quilt of the tail right into there, and then hand blind stitch this up over, and it will cover. That way this will not be in the way when you're putting it together. Now we'll just show you a little trick on doing the nose and little button eyes, and this kitty's done. To make the nose super easy, it's just a 2-inch circle out of contrasting fabric, hand gather around the outside, pretty tiny stitches, stuff it, pull it into a ball like this, and then place the open end down next to on the face, in the center of the face. It kind of overlaps the face and the snout. Then as the nose crowns around, that's where you're going to do some tiny stitches where the nose meets the little face, not right on the edge, because that would pull and would show. So you wait till it crowns around, and that just turns out cute. You can use a pom-pom too if you want. That works cute too, but this is fun. And then you can add buttons for the eyes, or you can satin stitch them, or sometimes I've used a little bit of black felt in a circle whip stitched around if you want to give it to a child. And then when it's put into a quilt, that's when I add the tail, and all of these raw edges are encased in that seam. These little characters look really cute when you do the meandering stitch all the way around, and then the dimension really pops and kind of gives them a foundation too. The pattern shows that you can sew down the middle here to separate the legs if you want. But this just turns out darling. I hope you enjoy it. To make the puppy, follow the kitty pattern. So how you're going to paper piece the body and make the dimensional pieces pretty much the same. The head is different, and of course the ears and tail are different. But what I want to show you in this video is how to customize. Perhaps your puppy at home has particular spotting that you want to copy. So you can mark any kind of spot you want on your pattern, put 2 pieces of fabric that you want the color of the spot to be, right sides together, sew that edge, and then when you've got your block, you're just going to slide that fabric in there to about where I want that spot to be. And then I'm going to sew on the outside solid line, cut on the dash line, and then it will have this little spot on there that I can hand tack down. I'm going to do the same thing on the head. So I put my 2 pieces of fabric right sides together in thin polyester bonded batting, but I wanted a particular spot on the side of his head. So I've pre-made this, sewing a 1/4 inch seam and turning it right side out, and I'm just going to put it in between the 2 layers of fabric, and then when I sew around, he's going to have a spot in that corner. So we'll show you what this cute puppy looks like when he's kind of customized. Here they're finished. You can choose, different colored tails, paws. You can put the spot anywhere you want. Maybe it's on this forepaw or over one eye, part of the muzzle. Just have fun with where you choose your little spots to give them character. And of course, this one was sewn into the seam, so there's a lot you can do with these techniques. You begin by making all of your dimensional pieces. So I've put a paper pattern on top of 2 pieces of fabric that are right sides together, thin polyester bonded batting. The paper's pinned on top, and I sew on the outside solid line, and you can set the stitch length just a little bit smaller to perforate the paper. Then you cut on the outside dash line, and then you remove the paper, even the little bit that sticks in the seams. Take all of that out, turn it right side out. We'll begin paper piecing the Dragonfly by doing area 1, 2, and 3. Area 1 being the body fabric. And I've placed a piece bigger than that area right side away because it's placed right where it's going to stay. Everything else is sewn and flipped. So number 1 is always right side away. And I can hold it up to the light to make sure all of area 1 is covered. Now, I actually made an extra copy of this paper pattern, and I cut out the different areas, and I pre-cut the background. And of course, these areas are bigger than the area that needs to be cut, but I wanted to get that angle right. You can do that, kind of saves a little bit on fabric, but also I can pre-cut all of my blocks, like stack all of number 2s in one area. And now I want to sew on the seam between 1 and 2, and I can crease it to transfer that location like that. Now I want to place my background fabric 1/4 inch past that fold. The bulk of the fabric's opposite where I'm trying to cover. So when I turn it over and sew that line, this will fold back and cover area 2. I'll show you what that looks like. Now I folded back that background fabric so it covers area 2. Now I'm going to work on area 3. I can crease it on that line between 1 and 3. And then with this side, I'm going to place another background fabric just past that fold line so the bulk of the fabric is opposite where I'm trying to cover. Then I'll turn it over and sew that fold line. Now I've folded back that last background piece, and look how beautiful the little points are. That is the beauty of paper piecing. Then with this side up, I've machine basted where the first set of wings go into the seam, and that will transfer them to this side, that location. Then I'm going to put the open edge of the wings 1/4 of an inch past that basting, and I want the wing to kind of touch the body right there, and I'll pin those to secure them. Now I've placed background fabric larger than the next area I'm going to cover, and it's also aligned with the wing. The bulk of the fabric is opposite the area I'm trying to cover, and I'm going to do that on both sides like that. Then I'll turn it over and sew on the line that will encase that first set of wings. Now I folded both of those pieces back. I did trim the extra out of the seam allowance, and then with this side up, I machine sewed or basted where the wings and the head meet that seam, and that transfer it to this side. Now I'll place the second set of wings so that the open edge is past that basting like that. And I can add a little extra stuffing to the head if I want. Place the head along that line too. Now I'll place background fabric also past that basting so the bulk of the fabric is opposite where I'm trying to cover. Pin all of that so it's secure. Turn it over and sew that whole line. Now I finished paper piecing this last background. Trim the extra out of the seam allowance and it flipped back and I pressed it. Now I want to mark the antennae. And at that point, I can cut it out on the outside dashed line all the way around, take the paper out, and then I'll outline stitch the antenna with embroidery floss, and then I'll tack the little head back over the antenna. And this little dragonfly just turns out so cute. And he's really not very hard. So I hope this helped. Starting with the lower part of the bear, I've placed his body so that all of area 1 is covered, and it's the bear fabric, so placed right side away. Everything else is going to be right side down. Now I did kind of pre-cut. I just took an extra copy and I pre-cut all the pieces that I'm going to need to paper piece because I just wanted to get this angle. You can do that. You just need to make it bigger than the area that you're going to cover. But I'm going to place it. I can like crease that line so I'm not working so blind on this side, and I'm going to place it right side down past that basting like that so the bulk of the fabric's opposite where I'm trying to cover. And I'm going to turn it over, sew that whole line, trim the extra out of the seam, and it will fold back. And I'm going to do the same thing to this side so that the bulk of the fabric opposite of where I'm going to cover, trim the extra out of the seam, and fold it back. Then I do the same thing with this bottom part. So it is area 4. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4. Bulk of the fabric opposite is where I'm going to cover, and then it folds back, press, trim the extra out of the seam, cut it out on the outside dash line. Then the little feet were sewn all the way around, just a little slit at the bottom, towards the bottom, 1 layer of fabric, turn right side out, and it's going to be placed there, and you're going to stitch around where the pad is. Just cut the paper pattern out and it will enclose the opening. Now to do the upper part of the bear, I've again pre-cut my pieces. You don't have to do that. You just whack a piece of fabric if you want. This is a little more exact to get those angles, and made it bigger than area 1. Cut it out of background fabric, placed it on this unprinted side of the paper pattern right side away. With this side up, I've machine basted where the ears go into the seam, and that gives me the markings on this side. Pre-made the head and the ears, and I've basted them on. I've put a little dart in these. You don't have to have the dart, but it's pretty cute. Put a little tuck there. Then the open edges go 1/4 of an inch past that basting. Then I pre-cut the other background for area 2 and 3 so that I can get this exact angle. And I'm going to put it right side down along that edge, turn it over, and sew on that whole line. Then it will open up and cover that area 2, and I'll do that for area 3. And then I trim the extra out of the seam, press them back, and you can lift that little chin, cut it out on the outside dash line. The ears are going to tuck back or tack back. This muzzle was sewn all the way around, just 1 layer trimmed or opened so that you can turn it. Then I'm going to blind stitch that muzzle, and the blind stitch goes up under the muzzle, not right on the edge. Here I've got my lower part done. I'm going to lift that chin, and I'll attach these, the upper and the lower, together. And Then the chin falls down and over that seam, and it just looks adorable. The bow ties in the pattern, super easy to do. I blush the cheeks and use just little seed beads for the nose and the eyes, and this guy turns out adorable. The gecko and the turtle are made similar to the other patterns in the book. There's a few differences, so we'll show you that here. First, you start with copying your paper pattern, the dimensional pieces, as many blocks as you want to make. That's how many copies you make. Place the paper pattern on top of 2 pieces of fabric right side together, thin polyester bonded batting, and then sew on the outside sew line, cut on the outside dash line. Remove the paper. Now, all of these pieces, including the turtle, are sewn all the way around. So in order to turn them right side out, you're going to split 1 layer of fabric, and through that you're going to turn it right side out. And this is a great place to use the straw and down method that we've shown on a different video. So be sure to check that out. Now for putting this little guy on a block, I've cut the block. This is 8.5 inches. You could do 7.5 inches for a finished 7-inch block. You can also shrink or enlarge this little guy when you go to make the copies. So you can make this any size you want. I first placed the little arms and fingers down in a position that I liked, and then I machine sewed down the middle with the open edge next to the quilt block. Then I'm going to put the body and the head down, and I'm going to just blind stitch the body down. I put little eyes, little seed beads for the eyes, and we show in another video how you blind stitch so it's not right on the edge. It's down under a little bit to keep that dimension nice and fluffy. And this little guy turns out really cute. And we'll show you the turtle. Now to finish the turtle, it was made the same way as the gecko, sewn all the way on the body, and then a slit through 1 layer, turned it right side out. I used the straw and the dowel method on this too. I put a little bit of stuffing in his appendages and his head. Then I'm going to put the open end next to the block that I've cut out, and then the shell was made the same way. There's a slit on the back. I added a little more stuffing just to the very middle. Then I'm going to put that shell on the turtle where the straight edge is next to the head, and then I'm going to sew 1/4 inch top stitching around that shell. I leave this top part open, and this just turns out so cute. So it again has a little pocket you can put things in, and seed beads for the eyes, and he's just adorable. In this video, we're going to show you how to make this adorable owl. Just so sweet, pretty easy to do. The video will really help you succeed. Now to make the owl, you're going to make a paper copy of all the individual components and the paper block pattern. Cut the components out and place them on top of 2 pieces of fabric that are right side together, thin polyester bonded batting. Sew on the outside solid line, cut on the outside dashed line, remove the paper and turn it right side out and press it so that all of the little edges are well defined. Now we're going to paper piece that out right onto the paper block. Each area is numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. They're all background pieces on the owl. I'm going to cut a piece of background fabric larger than area 1, and I'm going to place it on the unprinted side of the paper pattern, right side away, because it's never sewn and flipped. It's placed right where it's going to stay. All other background pieces are going to place right side down, because we're going to sew them and flip them over to cover the next space. Now, I need to know where to place the little tail right here. That's the piece we're going to start with. So I'm going to machine base right where the tail meets the seam. All the machine sewing is done with this printed side up. That will transfer the location of the tail to this side. So then I take my tail and I place the raw edges 1/4 inch above that basting, so that the raw edges will be in the seam. Then I'm going to place background fabric right side down, also along that edge. It's also 1/4 inch above that line between 1 and 2. Carefully hold it so it won't move, and turn it over and sew the whole line between 1 and 2. Then we trim the extra out of the seam allowance, folded back that area 2 that we just added, and it covers all of area 2 because we cut it big enough to do that. We press it so that the seam is really sharp. Now we need to know where to place the wing, the body, and the beak. So we're going to machine baste right where that meets. It's kind of important to get these edges marked. So your wing isn't going to be placed out here, but it's right on that edge. Okay, there's our marking right there on this blind side. So the fabric side is kind of blind. We're working blind, but that's just how paper piecing is. That's why we do the basting. Okay, now we're going to place the wing 1/4 inch above that basting. And we've got it within the edges here that were marked. Then we're going to do the body centered on that. Look how the stripe matches the tail. That was an accident. It's pretty cool. Now we're going to place the beak right along that edge and in the middle of the body. Pin that to secure it. Then I've got background fabric larger than this area 3 that we're going to cover next. And I'm going to place it right side down along that edge. It's also all the raw edges are above that seam line that we basted, right? Pin it to secure it, turn it over, and sew that whole line. That will enclose the raw edges of the wings, the body, and the beak. Okay, we switched fabric again, the same pattern. We've trimmed the extra out of this seam of this area 3 background, flipped it back so that it covers area 3. Now we need to know where to add this crown thing that owls have. And we're going to turn it over a machine base where that meets the seam. Now we'll transfer it to this side. Then we're going to place the raw edges. This piece is a little small. This is a little tricky, but it works. The raw edges are going to be past that basting. Okay, pin it to secure it. Keep it straight across the edge. Then we're going to place background fabric large enough to cover area 4, right side down, so that it's also, the raw edges are past that basting. Okay, then we're going to turn it over again and sew that whole line between 3 and 4. Now we finished that seam, trim the extra out of the seam allowance. It will flip back, and these little things will also flip back. So you have to press that really, really good. By the way, this is one of the few times I could use a stripe on paper piecing, only because all of these seams are exactly horizontal. Okay, usually stripes you stay away from, but I thought it was pretty cute in this pattern. Okay, now the only tricky part of this little owl is the eyes, and I'll show you that next. Now to make the eyes, they're very clever. You're going to have your paper pattern that you copied for your eyeball, and you've put 2 pieces of white fabric together, right sides together, and thin batting. Then you take a piece of fabric that you want the eyelid to be and fold it wrong sides together. Put the paper pattern on top, and lifting between the 2 white pieces, you're going to put the fold line of this eyelid fabric so that it aligns with this lid line. Then you're going to sew on the outside solid line, cut on the outside dash line, and you'll have something like this. Remove the paper. Now, it was sewn all the way around, so the only way you're going to be able to turn it right side out is with a little slit. Just do 1 layer of fabric and turn it right side out through that opening, and then press it. And this is what you'll get. This cute little eyelid. You know, owls are known for blinking their eyes with those big eyelids. Then these are felt circles, and I'm going to just tuck the iris up in the eyelid. The pattern for these is just cut them out from what's on the pattern, and then the pupil, and then with single thread I'm going to do stitches like a blanket stitch, but not really blanket stitch, just perpendicular to the edge. And then it has a framing around it that is done the same way. Slit 1 layer of fabric, turn it right side out, press it, and that's going to go
like that, frame the eye. Then I blind stitch these things on. Now when I blind stitch, I just lift it a little bit so that the stitches are just inside the edge so it doesn't show at all. Okay, and we'll show you how to put this onto the quilt. Look how darling this turns out. We've blind stitched the eyes on. You have to overlap the eyes a little bit so it covers the beak and the top part here, but it fits just perfect and just turns out darling. We've blind stitched the little body down. You can add stuffing to the body if you want a little more dimension, but this little owl turns out so cute. Thanks for watching.